Welcome to the Unity Movement and today's message. And for about 10 minutes, I want to just talk with you about God's mercy and why it's not dependent upon the things that the world would tell you it's dependent upon. Why God's mercy isn't dependent upon your race. Why God's mercy is bigger than your religion, and why it's not dependent upon your religion, and why God's mercy is not dependent upon your nationality. And I say that God's mercy is not dependent upon your race because God is God of all races. God is God before we begin creating ethnicities or human labels to define the various colors that we look like to others. You must understand that God was God in the beginning before there were human ethnicities or before we began identifying ourselves as blacks, as whites, as Hispanics, as Europeans. You must understand that in the beginning God is, and God is the creator of all men, because again you must understand that we all originated from the patriarch and the matriarch of humanity, whether they were black, whether they were white, whether they were green, whether they were yellow, whether they were purple. They were the creations of God, and we are the offsprings of those creatures. So that would mean that God had to predate our human ethnicities. That would mean that God had to predate our human nationalities. That would mean that God would had to predate our nationalities, which means that there had to be a form of grace and mercy before we invented or began defining ourselves by human ethnicities. God's mercy extends to all of us, whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Asian, whether you're American, because there's something that we do every day that puts God's mercy to the test. I say we go out and we get in our cars, and the risk of accidents, the risk of fatalities is enormous. But God's mercy is God's mercy, whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Asian, or even whether you consider yourself atheist. God's mercy isn't defined by your ethnicity. It's not defined by your nationality. It's not defined by your religious affiliations, because even as the word says, the rain falls on the just and the unjust just alike. The sun shines on the just and the unjust alike. The wind blows on the Christian and the Muslim just alike. I want you to get this, because you need to understand that God's mercy is not dependent upon your ethnicity. You need to understand that God's mercy extends and supersedes or is more important than your human religion, because God's mercy extends and falls upon all of us. It falls upon us when we walk into our places of employment, and the risk that there's a disgruntled employee that's plotting to destroy human life. God's mercy intervenes. And that mercy isn't just, it's not just given to those that would define themselves as religious. It's not just extended to those that look a certain way. It's not just extended to those that speak a certain way, but God's mercy is God's mercy because God is the Father of all of us. It's just like us with our kids. They don't always do the things that we would like them to do. They don't always say the things that we would like them to say. They don't always move in the direction that we would have them move in. But our mercy extends upon and unto them because they are our children. And they belong to us. And God's mercy is the same as it is with our mercy. Jesus said, if you being evil know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father give unto them that ask of him? Well, he also said, blessed are they that realize that they need God's help, for they shall receive it. So we must understand that God is not concerned with the labels of black, white, Hispanic, European. He's not concerned with the labels of Christian, Muslim, Jew, Palestinian. He's not concerned with American, Africa, Egypt, China, the Caribbeans. He's concerned with his creation and the heart of his creation. He's concerned with our actions. He's concerned with the heart of man, because even as Jesus said, a good man out of the good treasure of his good heart brings forth that which is good. God's mercy isn't God. You must understand that God isn't concerned about what you look like, because you shall exit this human flesh at some point throughout your human experience, and then you will have to stand before God. Just as Adam stood before God, Adam tried to clothe himself in Adam tried to clothe himself in fig leaves. He tried to hide himself from God. But just like Adam, God sees us underneath our coverings, whether those coverings are our ethnicities, whether those coverings are our religious affiliations, whether those coverings are our political affiliations, whether those coverings are our nationality. God sees the heart of man, because absent all of this flesh, absent all of the labels that we use to define ourselves, we are all the children and the creation of one God that created the heavens and the earth, irrespective of the names that we call him. Because again, you must understand that before we even began to speak and to communicate with one another, that was God who had created us in his image and after his likeness. Whether we looked a certain way, whether we spoke a certain way, whether we interacted a certain way, whether we walked and did things that may have confounded others, it was still God that had created all of us. And because he created all of us, not waiting till we had invented human religions to begin creating us, but creating us prior to the invention of human religions, we must understand that God's mercy extended even before we invented human ethnicities, even before we invented human religions, even before we invented nations. We must understand that God's mercy is God's mercy upon all of us, because when you are struggling in your marriage and don't understand where you're gonna go because you can't understand what she's doing or what he's doing, it's God's mercy that provides a hedge of protection around your marriage and your uncertainty. And that's not just to Christians. That's not just for Muslims. That's not just for Jews. That's not just for blacks, or it's not just for whites. It's for all of us. When you get out and you walk up and down the street and a car that's controlled by man doesn't veer off and hit you, that's not because you're Christian. It's not because you're Muslim. It's not because you're white. It's not because you're black. It's not even because you've done good. It's because God's mercy extends and falls on all of us. I want you to understand this, because we need to understand that there is one God, and that God is the God of all creations. We get confused and we fight and we war over the different names that we use to refer to him. But God is God irrespective of the names that we call him. This is why Jesus in his ministry said, Father. He didn't say Allah. He didn't say Jehovah. He didn't say El. He didn't say, he didn't use, he said, when thy pray, Father in heaven. Because he realized that all of us are the children of God. That God, that irrespective of the names, irrespective of the forms of worship, irrespective of the nationalities that you may worship him, that there is only one, irrespective of your perspectives of him, that there is only one God that had created the heavens and the earth and all life forms that dwell in the earth. God's mercy extends and is shown and falls down upon all of us. And God would have you know that, because God would have you know that absent all of the labels that we use to identify ourselves, that the only two labels that he used to identify us are the labels of good and the labels of evil. Could care less about the color or the word that we use to describe our ethnicity. Doesn't concern himself with the term African American. Doesn't concern himself with the term Caucasian. Doesn't concern himself with the term Caribbean or European. Doesn't concern himself with the labels of Christianity. Doesn't concern himself with the labels of Islam. Doesn't concern himself that you call yourself a Jew. It doesn't concern him, because he looks beyond that, even as he looked upon Adam, even as he looked upon Cain and Abel, and he looks at your heart, and he sees your heart by your actions. Doesn't see that you're an American, doesn't see that you are Asian, doesn't see that you're from the Near East, from India, or from Africa, doesn't see that you're from Trinidad and Tobago or Jamaica. He sees that you are created by him in his image, and he sees your heart and your actions, good and evil. I want you to know today that God's mercy is there for all of us, and it's always been there for all of us, because he's allowed us to continue to inhabit this earth that he gave us. He allows the grass and the earth to continue producing things that would benefit us. So God's mercy extends upon and unto all of us. But just as his mercy extends upon and unto all of us, he expects all of us to conform or to live by the principles of good. Not the principles of your religion, or not the principles of your ethnicity, or not the principles of your nationality, because you must understand that God principles far extend or far predates our ethnicities, far predates our religions, far predates our nationalities, because the principle of gravity is a principle that has been in the earth since the beginning of the earth. The principles of sowing and reaping are principles that have been in the earth long before we began communicating with one another via the spoken word. God's principles of God's principles, because there has to be a unifying, universal set of expectations that could apply to the first man just as they could apply to the last man. And those principles are contained in the phrase, do the good unto others, that you would have others do unto you. And if you wouldn't want it done unto you, don't do it unto another. I thank you for tuning in today. I hope that it's blessed you. And I hope you realize that God deserves the glory, because God's mercy extends and falls upon all of us, irrespective of our ethnicity, irrespective of our nationality, irrespective of our political affiliations, irrespective of our human religions. Because even as Jesus said, the tree shall be known not by what it calls himself, but by the fruits that it bears. Until next time, you've tuned in to the Unity Movement and today's message. I love you, and God bless.